here's our scene. Real simple, basic little set. Together we got two little toon characters we'll look at closer in a minute. We've got a little exterior capability to look through the window, and pretty basic, pretty simple. I do have a wall that I can fly in and out if I need a background wall. So here is our set, as I said. Now the first thing I like to do is turn off most all of the illumination. Now we go into our scene here, and let's look at our lighting. And right here. And typically scenes are loaded up with lots of lights, and I typically don't like any lights, and I don't want a floor shadow here since I'm going to have an actual floor. Don't need a floor shadow. Turn that off. Let's turn off this light. Let's turn off this light. And all we have left is a key light, and I'm going to turn it off. Now the other thing we want to make sure is that our ILB, and this is usually up a little bit, so let's make sure that it's off. So now everything's off. We want to start with completely, I like to start with a completely black set, and I can kind of see what's going to be going on here. Let's get some more room here, real estate. Okay, for now, let's go ahead and turn back on our key just so we have a little reference lighting. And we see here, obviously, these characters are in shadow. Let's do check our shadows, though, and make sure what we've got here. Let's we're in key. Let's modify. Let's look at our shadows. And obviously, I like shadows. It depends on the mood of your scene as to what those shadows are going to be, predominantly super dark or a little light, but I like to make sure the bias is set kind of low to 1. And obviously we've got a decent shadow there, and we may need to adjust this resolution at some point in time, but not now probably. So anyway, that's our basic set. Now once again, let's talk about potential lighting. And let's go back and turn off our key again. And let's start maybe with a key light. Let's create a spotlight. And here we have a spotlight. And you'll notice right away, spotlight seems to be working okay. Let's adjust it, modify it, let's crank it up a little bit. Sometimes, if you're not getting enough out of your spot, you might turn off inverse. And you might need to crank this back down, but that might give you a little more output from your light, and that's a possibility. And let's do that. Kind of a top light. Like so. So one way, of course, lighting a room is using a spot like so. Let's back it up. Let's rotate here. Back it up more. Crank it up. Now watch, you can see our shadow here on the wall. As we get the light higher, shadow goes lower. As we get the light lower, shadow goes higher. Typically, you want something kind of a low shadow there. So that's one light. Of course, that's only coming from one direction. And we can adjust the range, obviously, and give it a little more punch. And we can crank up the level there. We don't want to blow out the scene. Got to be careful of that level there. So, okay. And adjusting the angle of the beam. Hard edge on the beam or a soft edge, and typically soft edge. Like so is good. Okay. That's that light. Let's go ahead and duplicate this light. I'm going to hold down the Control Tab key and do a similar kind of light in our other room, like so. There we go. Very nice. Okay, 2 lights. Now, we do have a window, and probably going to be a daylight scene, so let's think about how we would light for daylight. Now, one thing, let's see here. Okay, one thing that might be annoying us right now is this little prop light. Notice it's illuminated, but it's not necessarily illuminating. It simply has a glow map on it, so just for now we can turn that down. And it also has self-illumination on, which sometimes is a little unnatural to do, so we'll turn it off for now and then we'll worry about it later. And we can adjust it like we like it. Okay, so let's take a look now and kind of get a basic idea of what our scene is going to do. Our little characters are going to move around a little bit, and then one's going to walk in to her brother's room. Notice she goes dark there, of course, from walking out of the spotlight we had coming in here. So that's basically what the characters are going to do, and that's what we're going to think about trying to light as good as we can. Now, obviously, by tweaking these lights, we can cover a little more what that character's going to do instead of, if you don't want them to walk into shadow. And this gets back into talking about the mood of our scene. If we're going for a toon comedy kind of look, typically things are bright and everything's pretty much evenly illuminated. Shadows are softer, not as dark and contrasty maybe looking. So we've got, as I said, I like to keep my lights to a minimum, but obviously we probably need a little more light for our scene than just a couple of spots, because we do have a window and we're going to try to create a daylight look. So let's think about that. Now we've got some image maps here of just some apartment buildings. So let's go ahead and do a cheat, and we'll just bring up self-illumination. That way we don't have to hit them with a light, because they would be illuminated by the sun, let's say, and that would be pretty much appropriate. They would look kind of that way. And if we go in here and look, and that looks about right, depending on. Now we have a tree here possibly that we can use as a prop, and of course it's not getting any light right now. So let's think about how we're going to illuminate outside the window. Let's move the tree for now, and let's think about bringing in another spotlight potentially. So let's take our spotlight here, and I'm just going to hold down the control key and drag, and we've duplicated another spot. And let's think about letting it pretend it's the sun coming through the window. And so we're going to rotate around here, and let's see. Now, depending on how this surface of the windows are set, we should at some point be able to get a shadow or the sun coming through that window. But that will depend and determine how this glass texture has been set, and we can adjust that hopefully. So let's get our spotlight here, and we'll probably duplicate another spotlight for the young man's room, like so. Okay, let's just do that. Now let's look at this window and see what's going on here. Let's click on this wall, and let's go into our texture modify, and let's see here. I think, okay, window glass. Let's just, for grins, turn off, there we go, turned off opacity, and you see we now can see a shadow coming through the window, and it's certainly illuminating our character very nicely, like so. But we still might want to have a semblance of glass there, so we don't necessarily want to kill the window texture entirely, we can adjust the shadow texture, and now you see we are getting a shadow being cast from that light, and the light's coming through and illuminating the room. Now we see it on the plant, sofa, and everything there, and of course it is lighting our character still. Now it's kind of got a little hazy look to it. I sometimes like to make that glass, you know, a little darker. You can still give it a little bit of gray there, but and let's see, I wonder, since we're using iClone 8, I wonder if we can make that texture. Let's see here. Window, base color, that's the window frame. This is the glass here. Let's wonder. There we go. We've made it a reflecting surface. And now we're getting some reflection from our room on the glass, which is kind of cool. And it looks more like a real glass, and now we're getting reflection of the buildings behind there. So if you have iClone 8, you might be able to create a nice look using reflection surface. There are some settings, as I remember. Here we are. Reflection strength can be adjusted there. Notice now it's gone away, and it can blur, but that wouldn't be appropriate for glass. So I think that will work out fine. Let me play with that diffusion color a little more. That's not making any difference, so that's okay. But that looks like a nice clean window, which is kind of cool. Okay, and we're also, of course, now lighting the character. So the character has a decent light here for the character. It's believable. It's sun. And you can also, of course, play with the color of that light, make it a little more warmer. If you want a sun kind of look to there, let's see here. We can adjust that color. Sun. Or if it was an evening, we'd go bluer, but if it's a sunny day, let's just give it a little bit of warmth. So it's got a nice sunny glow. And for now. So let's go ahead and think about doing the same thing for the young man's room. We'll duplicate this light by, how do we do that? We click on it, let's bring up our tool, and we hold down the control key and drag, and now we have light that room. And now we need to do the same thing on our window texture. So what we can do is go back over here and click on the window texture for that wall, and there's the reflection surface. Paint tool. Oops, don't do that. There we go. Let's see, I did it. I think that's all I need to do. Or do we? I think that's the same texture. Let's see. Not. There we go. Okay. Both windows. And did we do that for the other as well? Both those, yeah. They seem to be reflecting both just fine. Okay, very good. So now both windows are reflecting. We now have light in the room. And let's see now how our characters do as they walk from room to room. You've given it a little more light. Here, let's see if she comes out of there. Okay, she's lit well there. Goes into a little shadow there. Okay. All right, let's take a look now. I've added some cameras. So let's take a look at shoulder. Boy, okay. She's lit nicely. Look at shoulder. Girl. Okay. Now, the other lighting tool, notice, I mean, if you don't like a lot of dark shadows here, we can play with some things. And let's go back and look at bringing up our image-based lighting settings. Let's see here. Let's come over here. Okay, now notice, remember we turned that off. Our image-based lighting, which was the standard image that you can change that image. Notice what happens. It brings up a lot of light, and if I use image-based lighting, I usually go 1 or 2 maybe. I don't like it to be too flat, but as you say, if you're depending on the mood, comedy mood, everything's kind of warmly, brightly lit, not heavy shadows. So that's one way of doing it. And let's go back to this scene now and just see what we've got here. That we brought up. Okay, not too bad. But as I say, I usually don't like to do too much of this because once again it washes out walls and things. I just don't like that very much. So I keep that to a minimum, and we had it on 2, I think. Now the other option you have is as long as we are in, and this is important, you want to be sure you have these icons turned on, because that will give you the ideal look hereafter with image-based lighting. The other thing we have is the bounce strings, and this is adjustable, and light will be bouncing off of surfaces. And once again, I don't like to use a lot of this, but if you want a little bit more, then you can do that. Now it is keyframeable, so you notice you need to go back and set that at the beginning because it will be animating. But that's something you might want to think about doing, is using the bounce strength. And we had it set to 2.2, so let's go back to the beginning and set it to 2.2 as well, so it won't be animating on us. And that might be good to have a little more bounce light coming off, and that will ease up the shadows. Now obviously the other way to ease up the shadow is to go into shadows and take the strengths down. But as I say, I just think it gives the scene more of a dimensional quality if you have some shadows. You may not want them deep, 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 but you want them to have a little bit, so it gives the characters a 3-dimensional feel. Okay, let's come up with a completely different lighting scheme, trying some other options we have in iClone. Let's just, for now, we'll just turn off our spotlights, leave everything else like it is. So let's go ahead and also turn off our image-based lighting for now. Let's look at another option we have for lighting in iClone, and that is an emissive plane. You got ovals, rounds, squares. Let's try an oval, and let's see what happens with an oval using this type of lighting. Let's rotate that on. Give us a ceiling lighting coming from the top, and let's go over here to our first room. Play with it a little bit, see if we can utilize it in any way. I'm going to enlarge size a bit and just see if there's anything we can get with this type of lighting. Maybe yes, maybe no. Gives us a very soft light. and a little tricky to control. This is what happens with diffused light. It's pretty much going everywhere, and it's a little hard to contain, as it were. And there are some unique controls for it. Now notice it's probably not helping us here. We still may need to use the spotlight for the sun, which would be much more appropriate most of the time. So let's look at this. Got super soft shadows, if you'll notice there. Let's bring up our image-based lighting a little bit here. Whoops. And once again, very little goes a long, long way. 0, and there is 1, 2, 3, 4. So makes a little bit of a difference. I'm going to turn it down for now. We have some adjustments we can make utilizing image-based lighting, and the controls here under this particular icon, and by adjusting these settings. Now this gets us into making sure when you're lighting this type of scene that you know this object right here, your global illumination anchor. You've got to make sure that it is covering your scene, and to see what it's doing we have to bring up the modify panel, and there we go. We turn on view global illumination of voxels, and we make sure that our scene is covered with this strange pattern, because wherever you see this pattern, it will be the global illumination lighting will affect that area. So make sure it's not like this and you want to light the whole scene. You want to make sure the range covers your entire scene. So just a word of warning to make sure that's working correctly. So let's get back here and do some more adjusting here, and notice it's affecting everything, possibly a little more right now, so that might be a good thing. Let's make sure once again our global illumination is turned off. Okay, let's adjust our light here, and let's bring it up, and then move it over, and go. Okay, let's play our scene out here. I've got some keyframes there. Don't like that. Let's go. Yeah, we adjusted that by accident. Let's go back over here. Okay, here we are in our preview cam. Okay, okay, and pretty even, getting a little shadowing there, of course. And notice though, we really don't have much shadow to talk about, which I don't necessarily like, but once again, we can adjust potentially these settings and get a little shading, so we get a little depth here. You see, when those disappear, it just becomes very flat. Now, if you're looking for a super flat look, that's the way to do it, like so. Adjust our bounce, so, and that may be what you're looking for. But you got to be careful of getting a little bit of shadowing there. Okay, let's think about then moving this, duplicating this emissive plane over here, like so. Once again, And once again, you can obviously rotate these any way you want. That might help some of the look you're after. Now let's go ahead and turn on our sun spotlights. I think they were the last two here. There were those. Okay, yep. And we're getting a little bit of action there on the floor. Okay. This floor looks a little hot here. Probably want to make some adjustments there. Like so. Okay, let's see how those cameras, now we messed up one of the cameras, like the boy shoulder here. There we go. This is where our wall would fly in here, of course, take care of that problem. Okay. Yes, sir. Much flatter look, obviously, but you know, maybe that's what you're looking for. If you want more less shadowing, obviously, we adjust here the bounce strength, and then the shadows right here. So a lot of tweaking can be done. Also, we did talk about another way of getting more of a shadow effect, of course, is making sure our ambient occlusion, and it is turned on. We can see it happening there in the corners. So that helps us create a little bit of depth and gives us a little more dimensionality, as it were, by adjusting those settings. But once again, I think this is way too hot here, so I'd want to spend more time adjusting that one. And selecting that. And there's just all kinds of ways to make adjustments to that light. You can obviously have multiple emissive planes, but once again, I like to keep things minimal as possible to create the effect. I think that just makes it so much easier to light. You don't want too many shadows. I like to have good shadows that are effective. So I think we have some options there. So two slightly different looks, but I think that will hopefully give you an idea of different ways to light a set where actors have to move around. And one more thing might be helpful in ways, not necessarily lighting, but with your camera. Be sure to remember that depth of field can be your friend. So if you select your camera and go to the Modify tab and turn on depth of field, typically you pick your target like so, and by adjusting certain things, you can make those characters pop out a lot more in a scene by just making sure you use that. It's can be very impactful to utilize depth of field to isolate your character from the scene, and that certainly will help a lot. And by tweaking these adjustments here, you should be able to get a really cool look. And typically only when the camera is closer to your subject. In a wide shot, it's not necessarily accurate. You can always do it, But when you're using a wide-angle lens, you usually have a lot of depth of field. If you're using a tighter lens, you're going to have less depth of field, and the character will be isolated in the shot, and it'll make them pop out, which can be a good thing. So be aware of that. Now also, we didn't play with our tree, so let's take a look at that tree out there and see how it's going to look, depending on our shot. So let's see, it's getting a bit of light there. Let's bring our character back in. There she is. So once again, she's getting, I think, a nice light from the sun spotlight that we're utilizing in our scene. There's one of these there. And once again, that can be brought up a little more, which it typically would be for a sun shot, maybe. And let's see what combining another emissive plane out here to eliminate the tree. Another shot, so that can also be utilized too. That looks pretty good, I think, as well. Yeah, so just wanted to make sure I had that aspect taken care of.